Okay, so welcome to the Richard L. Thompson lecture series. This is our third session, or fourth? Fourth, if we include the introductory series, which was a live public event. So today's our fourth presentation of this ongoing lecture series, and it's based on the book by Richard L. Thompson, Sariputta Das, Mechanistic and Nonmechanistic Science. So again, we're going to be covering 6 of his major works throughout this throughout these lecture series. So the first session on February 4th, our dear Brahmatirtha discussed the introduction to the book, where Sariputta explains that although the current mechanistic worldview implies that everything is a machine made of matter, Bhakti Yoga goes beyond modern science by developing higher cognitive powers that lie dormant in the conscious self. And that recording is on our YouTube page, as well as the following two. The second session was by Parama Rupa. Very interesting, was chapter 1, Searching Past the Mechanics of Perception, which reveals that although modern life sciences have made the bold claim that all life can be explained by physics and chemistry, even thinking, feeling, and willing, they still have not been able to explain consciousness. So that was an interesting exploration into that. Third session by Parama Rupa was a presentation on chapter 2, Thinking Machines and Psychological Parallelism, which explored the question of whether it is possible for a machine to possess a conscious self that perceives itself as the seer and the doer. Also very interesting. And so we're still waiting for Dvija Govinda.
Let me stop and make him. I'm going to make a phone call.
One moment, because he is overseas. So
He's in Kiev.
Yeah, he's in Kiev right now. So we just want to make sure that everything is okay. Sometimes internet.
Yeah, there are times he loses
And good
power.
morning to all of you who are joining. We also have some friends here at the BI. We're in the library of our headquarters in Gainesville, Florida. So we'll just be a moment.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just spoke with Dvija. He didn't realize, and this is my mistake. I didn't remind him that we switched to daylight standard, Eastern Standard Time. He got off daylight. I mean, we switched to daylight savings time. He didn't know, so but he says he'll be here in about 2 or 3 minutes. So thank you for waiting, and I'm glad I caught him.
Okay, so while we wait, I'm wondering if anyone has any comments, any questions about if you've been here for the past few lectures, if there's anything you'd like to share we can open it up to anyone.
I have a suggestion. Maybe since we're waiting and there's some people here that maybe I
BT,
don't
you're muted.
recognize.
You're
Oh,
muted.
am I muted? Do you hear me?
Not muted. We can't hear you.
Oh,
Okay, hold on. We can't hear you.
you can hear me?
Your volume's a little low.
Yes, you're not.
Alright. Which one's the TV?
Yeah, I'm actually on it through a phone line.
Okay, now we can
Can
hear
you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm wondering if while we're waiting, there's some people here who I don't know, maybe everyone could give a 30-second introduction where you are and what your interest is.
Great idea. Thank you.
I'll begin. I'm Brahma Tirtha. I'm the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So I have a keen interest besides Sariputta being one of my best friends.
Okay, thank you. My name is Leela. I am here at the BIHS headquarters in Gainesville, and I have a general interest in all of Sariputta's work. It's very interesting. And I'm here facilitating these lecture series along with Krishni and Chris.
My name is Bimbadar Das. I have come up with some ideas how we can rationalize the Vedic version in terms of Western science.
My name is Christina. I live at Krishna House, and I am also part of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. I'm working right now on a book about consciousness that explains concepts of consciousness and Vedic philosophy to lay people for distribution by the BBT.
Maybe next, Anita Police. Police? I don't know how you say that. Or Mahendra, you want to turn on your camera for a moment? Say hello. Like a Bhagavatam class. Everyone's sleeping. Ashish?
Sure. My name is Ashish. I live in Palo Alto, and I run the Stanford Conscious Living Club at Stanford here. So I got interested in the BIHS lectures because we were thinking to work with BIHS for the Stanford Conscious Living Club.
Yeah, and we're very glad to work with you. And of course, our connection is our good friend Kunal.
Yeah. I know Kunal, and I'm in touch with him. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dana, it says Dana K.
Hi everyone. I am from Fernandina Beach, Florida, but currently in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, visiting back home for a little bit. And I'm just honestly just generally interested and just really intrigued with all of these teachings. And I'm very new to Bhakti, but I'm just trying to just gobble up as much information and knowledge and just everything I can. So I'm just happy to be here. Thank you very much.
And we're equally happy to have you. Narataka? You're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
You're muted.
I would suggest using sign language.
Okay. Okay, got.
Oh, that's better.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Nartaka Gopal. I live in Alachua, and I'm a Jyotish. I do Vedic astrology for the last 30 years. I studied in India, and I'm very interested in all of the items on the agenda at BI. It's very enlightening, and it's just what the planet needs at this time, I feel. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
And those of you who don't know, Nartaka is, I'll embarrass her a little, quite the saintly lady who I've known for about almost 40 years. And everything she does is done with so much devotion. Langa Ganesh?
Hare Krishna Prabhus, all glories to Srila Prabhupada and to your services. I'm very much interested in the topics that are being covered by BI. Higher intelligence and higher knowledge is very important. The human advantage is that we can utilize that facility, and I'm glad to see it's being done so well. Thank you very much.
And thanks for being here. Who did I miss? Doug, did I get you? No.
No, Hare Krishna. I'm a researcher at the BI. My background is in cosmology, and I'm interested in all things cosmology related. And anytime Dvija Govinda gives a talk, I try and make it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Doug himself has a PhD, and technically it's astrophysics, I believe. Who did I miss? I missed somebody probably. Who's in the room with you, Prishni?
Chris. And
Dr. Hugo.
yeah, and
Hugo.
And Roger.
I'll see you a little late. Okay.
Yeah, and
very
so
good.
without further ado, we have Dvija Govinda here. Hare Krishna, Dvija Govinda, thank you so much for being here, for presenting. So
Hare Krishna, please accept my blessings always.
Jai. Okay, so today I'd like to introduce Dvija Govinda, who will speak about chapter 3 from Mechanistic and Nonmechanistic Science, Dialogue on Consciousness and the Quantum. So Dvija Govinda obtained his PhD degree in acoustics from the Institute of Hydromechanics at the Ukrainian National Academy of Sciences in 2004, and a second PhD in computational mathematics from the Institute of Cybernetics at NAS in 2020. Since 1999, he's been working at the scientific and production enterprise Delta SPE in the area of telecommunications. And was a member of the IEEE for 9 years and has been teaching Vedic mathematics and other courses in Kiev, Krishna Consciousness Academy since 2013. He's also a very active member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies. So we thank you for being here with us. You may go ahead.
Thank you very much for a kind introduction. It's my great honor to take part in this wonderful mission of spreading the Vedic knowledge as it was presented by Sadaputta Prabhu, according to the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and Guru Parampara. Today we're discussing the third chapter of book Mechanistic and Nonmechanistic Science, which is called Dialogue on Consciousness and the Quantum. So this is a short outline of the main topics discussed in this chapter. Mainly it has 4 sections. The general statement of quantum mechanical problem. Then next section is what quantum mechanics is really saying. Then threading the labyrinth of quantum epistemology. And finally, a discussion on contrasting world views. So, who are the participants of this talk? The chapter is organized as a discussion between several main contributors, main participants. Dr. Felix Avaroha, mathematician, who, as I understand, has a close connection with the personality of Sadaputta Prabhu himself. Also, biologist, Dr. James Yantri, Kutark, physicist. I hope I correctly pronounce this term, physicist. How is it correct? Dr. Sophus Baum and Dr. Francesca Schuler. Sadaputta Prabhu gives the disclaimer that all characters are fictitious, but most of the views they express have been expounded by various scientists and philosophers. So the main point of the discussion in this chapter is about potential of quantum mechanics to describe the phenomenon of consciousness. But it happens so that foundations of quantum mechanics are discussed also. So Dr. Yantri starts putting the thesis that consciousness is something generated by matter when the matter reaches certain levels of complex organization. And this also, of course, will be discussed in much detail in chapter 5. Dr. Avaroha states that the current understanding of the nature of consciousness has remained in a completely undeveloped state. For example, there is no explanation for the conscious perception of the color red. This is what we now call usually qualia. This term qualia is not used in this chapter, but the idea is the same. The current modern science of consciousness cannot give satisfactory explanation for the phenomenon of perception by the humans or by animals of different qualities of the objects. Also, one of the points in the discussions is the following. Dr. Yantri says, some speak of consciousness as being distinct from matter and refer to it as epiphenomenon. The consciousness does not exert any influence on the behavior of matter in living systems. And in his turn, Dr. Avaroha answers that in the science of physics, all other products or aspects of a physical system have some effect, or do have some effect on the behavior of the system as a whole. Why should consciousness be an exception? So, and then follows the discussion about the general ideas, the general foundations of quantum mechanics. I hope that my attempt to summarize it in simple way will be successful, by your blessings. In particular, Dr. Avaroha gives the famous example with Wilson cloud chamber. And the key concept of the quantum mechanics is a state vector which satisfies the Schrödinger equation. And it is said that the state vector provides a complete description of the state of that system. In that sense, that the system possesses no physical properties not specified by the state vector. So, state vector refers to a set of alternative events with their probabilities. So, in quantum mechanics, we do not, it is not such straightforward or deterministic as a classical mechanics, but here we deal with the probabilities of the events which can be specified by this state vector. So, but if quantum mechanics deals just with probabilities, how do we reconcile that an observer witnesses the appearance of one particular track in Wilson chamber? So, Plutarch explains that we must change from the quantum mechanical to the classical mode of description at the point where the ion trails, which we describe quantum mechanically. And this gives rise to visible vapor trails. And also he quotes Niels Bohr that the quantum theory is meaningless unless it can be translated into the language of classical physics, which we use to describe our observations of the world. So, and Dr. Plutarch states that at the time of measurement, when the microscopic quantum phenomena are amplified to the point of at the time of measurement, I think the word when is shouldn't be here. At the time of measurement, the microscopic quantum phenomena are amplified to the point of producing observable effects. At this time, a very important change occurs in the components of state vector. They lose the power to interfere with one another and become effectively independent. In his turn, Dr. Avaroha says, naturally, we would suppose that changes in state vector must correspond to changes occurring in nature, in the physical system itself. What phenomena in nature can correspond to such abrupt reduction, so-called reduction? This is for the first time when this quantum mechanical term reduction appears here. what phenomena in nature correspond to this abrupt reduction of the state vector, when suddenly the components of state vector stop to correlate between each other, become independent, and particularly one particular one of them is selected and presents the observed physical event. So the conclusion is that we are faced with a situation of almost continuously having to make abrupt, non-physical modifications in our description of the physical state of the system. And all this simply to prevent this description from contradicting some of the most obvious aspects of our ordinary experience. So Dr. Varuha means, Sadaputta Prabhu here means that this idea of reduction of state vector, it contradicts to our common understanding, our common perception to the events which occur in the outside phenomenal world around us. So, and again, in other words, but the same is said by Kutark, we could describe the cloud chamber by means of quantum mechanics and then revert to classical physics at another point in the process of observation. And now he quotes, previously he quoted Niels Bohr, but now almost, I think, very close quote from John von Neumann. The boundary between the observer and the observed system can be shifted, with everything on the observed side being completely describable by quantum mechanics. And correspondingly, as I understand, on the other side, on the side of observer, everything could be described by classical mechanics. This meant here. Okay, and what answers Avaroha? This procedure leaves the conscious observer on the side of the boundary where phenomena are to be described in terms of inadequate classical concepts. If you are truly forced to divide the world into two parts in this way, then the quantum theory is incapable of adequately describing the observer and his or her consciousness. So this is an important preliminary conclusion, which is stated by Sadaputta Prabhu, that the quantum theory is, in its current state of development, let's say, is incapable of adequately describing the observer and his or her consciousness. What says Kutark? No, we can use one comprehensive state vector to describe the cloud chamber. To describe the cloud chamber, the human observer, and as much of his environment as you may wish to include. So he proposes to introduce some very comprehensive state vector which would describe all the events, not just in the pertaining to observed system, let's say Wilson chamber, but also to the observer himself and to the environment of the observer. So he says, he follows, we should simply keep in mind that the state vector must be interpreted as an objective description of physical reality. So I believe it's one of the postulates of quantum mechanics that the state vector must be interpreted as an objective description of physical reality. This is a famous picture from this chapter. So what is the idea proposed by Kutark? And there's then in many details, much details, is discussed by Sadaputta Prabhu. So the state vector for the total system, this picture describes or gives a hint what would it be for the state vector to include also the human observer. The 5 images correspond to the 5 situations of the observer involving distinct experiences and perceptions. So as I understand here, the consciousness of observer is also included into the state vector, describing the physical experiment which is carried out. Okay, let's assume that there could be some such comprehensive state vector, and Avaroha Prabhu asks, Dr. Avaroha, Sadaputta Prabhu and Dr. Avaroha asks, can we use Schrödinger equation to really describe the physiological processes going in the body of the observer? Very straightforward question. Kutark, of course not. We simply assume this because if it were not so, then our theory would be wrong. Quite funny answer. And what is next? Oh, so, okay. This is, yes, this is the logic which is then explained by Dr. Avaroha, by Sadaputta. Okay, let's take the system, observed system, for example, particles, set of particles in the Wilson chamber. This system obeys Schrödinger equation. Okay, let's then the following step. Take the system plus I nerve. Again, it is assumed that we can construct such state vector that it will obey Schrödinger equation. Let's take the system of again physical system, I nerve and brain, human brain. Yes. Again, it should obey Schrödinger equation. Then we add to this the body of the observer, and again the state vector should obey the Schrödinger equation. But still there must be something beyond, or someone. Something or someone, of course, should be beyond it. And this something or somebody is some non-physical observer. Yes, if we assume that everything can be described in the terms of quantum mechanics, then inevitably we should come to conclusion that there must be somebody or something beyond the non-physical observer. This is the logic of, as I understood it, this is the main logic which is propounded by Sadaputta Prabhu while answering to the challenge by Kutark. Also, I think this is argumentation which was given by Sadaputta Prabhu, as Jayadvaita Swami describes it in his story, that when Sadaputta Prabhu first time or second time came to the New York temple, he described to Jayadvaita Swami this logic, that inevitably we come to the conclusion that outside every system, no matter how big or how comprehensive it can be, outside it, beyond it, must be some non-physical entity. Okay, Kutark then, I'm not strictly following his logic, but he, I don't know, I just recalled, this is one of the ways in Vedic literature to, when you lose chances to support your own point of view, you just want to defeat the point of view of your opponent. I don't know, maybe Vitanda or something like this, which Sarabhama Bhattacharya followed at the last stage of talk with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, Kutark says, actually the observer is irrelevant. Once the observer is brought into the picture, the impression is created that a subjective element has been introduced into physics. Well, this is, I believe, something many physicists are afraid of, to introduce subjective element into the physics. I'm not sure I should give. Okay, I'll mention this this small argument between Kutark and Avaroha. So Kutark says, I can give you example of classical physics in which a repeated reduction is really necessary. Consider a rotating wheel. So we have a rotating wheel. Fortunately, I did not prepare some picture for it. But it's well-known formula that the angle which is covered by the this wheel is described by the angular velocity, and it's a product of angular velocity by time passed since the start of measurement. Okay, but due to the influence of environment, this angular velocity will always slightly fluctuate. So as time passes, this uncertainty will result in a large cumulative error, large cumulative uncertainty in the angle, in the measured angle. So we have to, from time to time, we have to redefine this angular position. But Varoka counteracts, and he says, no, this is a different in very significant way. In your wheel example, the repeated reduction or redefinition is necessary because our information about the physical system is incomplete. Particularly, we do not take into account the environment, which causes this uncertainty in the exact value of velocity, angular velocity. So in the quantum mechanical situation, this information is supposed to be completely specified by the state vector. So this is the preliminary conclusion, which is stated by Siddhartha Prabhu, that the very point I've been trying to make is that the state vector does not, in fact, provide a complete description of the system. So any attempt of the quantum mechanics, at least at the current stage of its development, any attempt will result in failure, and because any attempt to completely describe the phenomenon of consciousness, phenomenon of the world, it will become a failure because a state vector cannot provide a complete description of the system. This is, I believe, maybe 1/2 or about so maybe 60% of the content of the chapter. So this is just preliminary conclusions. So the Putta Prabhu shows brilliant understanding, or Dr. Varoka shows brilliant understanding of quantum mechanics to show its incapability to describe the physical systems, what to say about the observer and consciousness, observer and his or her consciousness. Also, by this time, the following quantum mechanical ground stones were discussed: state vector as a total description of the system, impossibility to describe consciousness by means of quantum mechanics. And also it was stated that the state reduction or procedure of quantum measurement doesn't have real physical basis. Okay, and should we continue to the end or towards the end of the chapter? So the last point, the last subsection, is discussion of contrasting worldviews. Assuming much easier for understanding subsection, but very interesting. I want to present a brief outline of the main ideas which are presented in this subsection. Particular two other participants of this talk come into game. They enter the game. Dr. Sophus Baum, who proposes to overcome the problem of quantum measurement with the so-called many worlds, well-known many worlds interpretation. So he suggests that, in brief, he suggests that the reality consists of an infinite system of bifurcating, non-communicating universes. In some sense, there is universal state vector, universal wave function, which is objectively real. It means that there is no need for the wave function collapse, no need for the reduction of the state vector, in other words. So the possibility of any chance is completely eliminated. And all possible outcomes of quantum measurements are physically realized in some world or another, in some universe or another universe. So all possible possibilities of the outcome of any experiment, of any of the real life situation, all of them are possible, but they will be realized in different universes. So we have infinite continuum of different universes, which describe the various possibilities of how the situation unfolds itself. Okay, so this is many words interpretation. So, and just as a universe splits into multiple universes, so the observer splits into multiple observers, one for each universe. In each universe, the corresponding observer is conscious of the particular course of events that occurs there. So I believe it's called Hugh Everett, many words interpretation. Many words interpretation is usually called now. Something which we cannot, I believe, neither prove nor disprove. Okay, this is what tells Dr. Sophus. We just happen to be in a particular universe that obeys the universal laws. But some of our near duplicates, so the duplicates of I, are now experiencing life in the universe in which all of these laws have just begun to be completely violated. So there is the universes with the other set of laws and etc. You understand all possible consequences. Okay. So next contributor of the talk is Dr. Schuler. And here on this slide, we see the brief explanation of theory which he promotes, Dr. Schuler. Everything is void, ultimately. I even can change to another slide. Oh, yes, of course. That's it. Yes, that's it. But to be more precise, Dr. Schuler states that reality, in fact, doesn't exist. All we can talk about is there are only patterns of correlation in sense data. Patterns of correlation in sense data. Words to be repeated. A theory is of value. A theory is of value if it accurately describes such patterns. I think Stephen Hawking stated once that the current science, modern science, does not actually aim at the finding of objective laws of the universe, but rather it tries to find the correlations between the theory and observed phenomena. I think it's quite close to what Dr. Schuler here says. So, and Avaroha answers, your limited system of discourse seems to depend on the existence of a higher reality for its very definition. Again, your limited system of discourse seems to depend on the existence of a higher reality for its very definition. I cannot give any comment. Please answer by Sadaputta Prabhu. Do you regard other persons as patterns of correlation in sense data that do not really exist? And Shunya answers that our desire is, so he shows quite personalistic approach. Our desires for meaning, purpose, understanding can never be satisfied or even meaningfully discussed. This applies even to the desire to understand the real basis of our own existence. At most, we can obtain some consolation by admiring the beauty of a symmetrical system of equations or the elegance of a concise deductive argument. In this way, we can spend the brief interval of time that we somehow pointlessly occupy between two infinite, meaningless voids. I'm not a native English speaker, but I think it's very, very poetic, very beautiful. And a very, very beautiful statement, but it's not, it worth to be regretted, in fact, such a position. Plutarch. So he makes a conclusion that this discussion becomes very exhausting. In fact, we have no idea of how to deal with consciousness scientifically. Some prominent physicists have proposed that consciousness is directly responsible for the reduction of the state vector. Some of them maintain that the consciousness is something fundamental. They argue that the state vector is somehow reduced at the moment it begins to display ambiguities. At the moment when it begins to display ambiguities that can be perceived by the observer. This can supposedly done by consciousness, but how it is done is not at all clear. So consciousness may in some way be connected with the reduction of some artificial wave function, but it remains hypothesis, which is difficult, if even possible, principally possible to prove. Okay, and what proposes Dr. Avaroha at the final stage of this talk? It is not possible to repair the defects of quantum mechanics by grafting something new onto it. For example, Newton's theory of gravitation could not be amended by making some small alterations. It could be supplanted only by something fundamentally different, such as the general theory of relativity. To obtain an adequate understanding of consciousness and its relationship with the physical world, we will similarly have to approach the subject from a radically different point of view. And for the rest of the chapter, Sudha Prabhu briefly describes how the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita describes this such contradictory phenomenon of consciousness and its relationship with the outside world. So there are several postulates which I will read, the basic points which we of course know from study of Bhagavad Gita. Each individual living organism consists of an irreducible conscious entity residing in a physical body composed of gross material elements. The body is insentient. The body itself is insentient. This conscious entity, or Jivatma, is the actual sentient self and cannot be explained. It cannot be explained in mechanistic terms. Jivatma possesses the attributes of a person, including consciousness, intelligence, and innate sensory faculties. All of them are non-mechanistic. Also, the Jivatmas can be compared with the hypothetical fundamental particles sought by physicists. Interesting analogy. As these particles have irreducible material properties, so the Jivatmas can be thought of a fundamental units of conscious personality endowed with certain irreducible personal traits. As far as I understand, irreducible here means that it cannot be reduced or described by some basic mechanistical units or some theories. No, the conscious personality is irreducible in this sense. So the opponents of Dr. Avaroha asked him whether there are any experiments proving the existence of the soul. In physics, we can show that the entity exists only by an experiment that takes advantage of that entity's mode of interaction with the other matter. For example, we can mention 4 types of force: strong interaction, weak interaction, electromagnetic force, and gravitational force. So, this is part of the argument with the of the answer of Sadaputta Prabhu. It's very important. So again, in physics, there is a common way of investigation or discovery that we take advantage of the entity's mode of interaction with the matter. For example, electric particles are in some way, they interact with the electromagnetic field, for example. So, and what is the conclusion? So, to detect the soul in an experiment, we would have to take advantage of the soul's particular mode of interaction. So, to discover the soul, finally, we should apply some principally different apparatus of, or principally different mode of interaction. To make a real study of consciousness, we have to take advantage of the higher cognitive potencies of the Jivatma self. When the Jivatma is embodied, its innate senses are linked up with the information processing system of the physical body. And thus, the normal sensory perceptions of the Jivatma refer almost exclusively to the physical states of machines, including the machine of the brain. So yes, Jivatma is in some way connected with the machine of the body, which can be described in the machinery or mechanistic terms. But the inherent senses of the Jivatma are not limited to observing the states of the physical body. Jivatma is capable of relation or direct reciprocation both with other Jivatmas and with the Paramatma or the super consciousness. I just recalled, maybe it was in the introduction, maybe the wonderful example with the pilots which drive the airplanes at some distance from one another. They can interact with each other, but only by some artificial means, not directly. And also they interact with the, I don't know how it's called in English, the operating center, airport operating center. So the Jivatma is capable of relation or direct reciprocation both with other Jivatmas and with the Paramatma, or the superconsciousness. This mode of interaction directly involves the use of all personal attributes and qualities, and thus it cannot be described in mechanistic terms. So the conclusion is it can be understood and meaningfully discussed only by persons who have attained to this level of experience by direct realization. So some qualification is needed to properly understand, to have a proper experience of the Jivatma. Dr. Schuler, of course, counteracts, saying that such realization is purely subjective. And Dr. Avaroha answers that the blind person wouldn't be able to appreciate the statements of seeing persons. Realized persons are able to perceive themselves and others directly with their innate transcendental senses. They are not restricted to observations of external behavior. The existence of cheating does not imply that a genuine science of higher consciousness is not possible. I believe it's also something said before by Schuler also. The existence of cheating does not imply that genuine science of higher consciousness is not possible. The Bhagavad Gita outlines a practical system for the attainment of higher realization. In this system, the seeker of knowledge must take instruction from a realized soul who is fully capable of detecting mistakes and illusions. For example, in classical physics, we can characterize an electron as a minor charged particle that interacts in a certain way with the electromagnetic field. Similarly, we can understand the true character of Jivatma in terms of its natural interaction with the Supreme Person. So, interesting, beautiful analogy. The ultimate goal of self-realization is to attain to this state of natural reciprocation with the Supreme. This mode of interaction is entirely personal, being based on the exchange of loving service. Quite a different style now, ending this chapter, than the dry language of modern science, which prevailed at the very beginning. So finally, Dr. Avaroka says, it is your multiple splitting universe theory, which is indeed unverifiable. By extrapolating empirical findings beyond all justifiable bounds, you arrive at fantastic and unverifiable world views. Direct verifiability is the whole point of the approach to higher consciousness that I have been outlining. So it possesses direct verifiability. It is certainly true that you cannot prove the existence of God on the basis of reasoning and empirical data. But if God is real and the conscious self is endued with suitable innate capacities, then we should be able to know God directly. Dr. Yantri says, why is it necessary for you to introduce such an elaborate scheme? We should simply try to proceed step by step. We should come to this advanced science of consciousness gradually. And Avaroka answers that the progress in understanding the relation between consciousness and matter is bound to be very slow and uncertain. This is why the various attempts to introduce consciousness into the quantum theory are premature. Scientists propose a theory in which consciousness causes this reduction. Yet this theory may fail to take many aspects of consciousness into account. Kutark asks, doesn't it mean that our scientific approach to understanding nature is futile? Is it really futile? No, says Avaroka. The measurable phenomena generated by non-mechanistic entities can at least be partially described by an open-ended hierarchy of mechanistic theories of ever-increasing complexity. Thus, there is no lack of available subject matter for mechanistic theorization. For example, there is no doubt much to be said in mechanistic terms about the interaction between the Jivatma and the physical body, and there is extensive information on this subject in the Vedic literature. Since the study of the Jivatma and its relation with the Supreme Person, Shri Krishna, presented in the Bhagavad Gita, is based on reliable and systematic procedures for obtaining knowledge, it should certainly appeal to the genuine scientist, even though it completely transcends the domain of mechanistic theory. So, Prabhu says that intelligent scientist should take advantage of this approach of Bhagavad Gita, which should certainly appeal to his scientific character. This study can be realized through practical experience. And finally, so conclusions. Yes, we came to conclusions, which are one of the possible conclusions of this talk, that the attempts to introduce consciousness into the quantum theory are premature. They fail to take many aspects of consciousness into account. Some fundamentally different approach is needed. And what is candidate for this approach? The study of the Jivatma and its relation with the Supreme Person, Shri Krishna, presented in the Bhagavad Gita is based on reliable and systematic procedures for obtaining knowledge. This study can be realized through practical experience. So I believe this is all what I want to just briefly say about this very interesting, very important chapter. Thank you very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Dvija Govinda. Thank you very much. Does anyone, we'll open it up to questions and comments. And so you can either raise your hand or you can send a question or a comment through the chat.
Браматирка, Прабhu.
Well, I thought this is one of the more difficult chapters in mechanistic. So you did a nice job in presenting it. Sariputta used a clever literary technique in which he could take some known positions and kind of even bash them without having to name the opponent by making this a semi-fictional dialogue. But my question is this. This was written some decades ago. What has changed in the world of physics? Or I'll ask differently. Is there anything that has changed in the world of quantum physics to make some of his conclusions needing revision?
Thank you very much for the.
Stand.
Thank you very much for the answer. Of course, I'm not such a specialist in the field of quantum mechanics and the attempts to describe the phenomenon of consciousness. I think that the basic positions remain the same. Of course, I believe that the theory of Hameroff and Penrose emerged. No, it was already at the time of Sariputta. It was, of course, much later than this book, Mechanistic and Nonmechanistic Science, was issued. Yes, maybe they introduced some details, but basically the conclusion is still the same. That this effect of wave function reduction, whatever it could be in reality, it cannot describe the phenomenon of consciousness in satisfactory way. We still cannot say that it can describe the phenomenon of consciousnness. Taking the theory, yes.
Even in the double slit experiment, there's still debate of how consciousness impacts it or doesn't impact it. These things.
Yes. There is still no clear understanding, no clear mutual agreement.
I recently bought a slide that has slits in it, various double slits, and a laser beam, just to try it myself and see what it looks like. And then the question of what does consciousness do is so debatable. So I know there's a lot of other, the Noetic Institute feels very strongly that consciousness impacts things like double slit and pair project, and then there's others that say no. So I agree with you that since Sariputta wrote it, the philosophical points he made have not been successfully challenged. I agree with you on that. But
yes.
There's a lot of work for us to do at the BI to understand it deeper. We are all guaranteed another birth if we want to continue working on this.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so Doug, we have Doug and Christina. So Doug, go ahead. Your hand went up first.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Dvija Govinda, that was great. Remind me again when this was published? The book? What year?
What year it was published?
1981.
When?
1981.
Oh, wow. My first reaction was that I feel like he would be very astonished at the level of, I don't know if it's more of a cultural phenomenon, but just how strong the Everettian many worlds view is nowadays. How it's basically the dominant view amongst physicists. So trying to do everything to push consciousness aside, and adopt that view. Since from 1981, it was very, even from its inception until about less than 10 years ago, it was kind of just thought of as a silly interpretation. Now it's definitely in vogue, and it's the one that everyone seems to be adopting. I wish Sadaputta was around to comment on that. It still, of course, doesn't solve the problem of how consciousness is involved in these interpretations, but it's interesting that that is the predominant prevailing view among physicists, the Everettian view.
Many words interpretation is prevailing now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Hare
Christina.
Krishna, Teja Govinda. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really amazing. I'm sure that you covered this, but if you could just review for me one more time. So the part about how the thinking about how the Schrodinger equation can describe the cloud chamber system, and then the eye and the optic nerve, and then the brain and everything, and how I'm a little bit confused as to why that proves that there must be a non-physical observer. Is that because of like there has to be some other variable to collapse all the different possibilities, or is it because, like, if you are the observer within the system, you have to and you can like make the equation yourself, or why is it exactly that leads to or that naturally implies that there must be a non-physical observer outside the system?
Thank you very much, Christina. That's a very good question. I hope that it will not be asked today, because I can just share my understanding. The quantum mechanics, in particular, the part of the Schrodinger equation, deals with the internal state of the system, which just describes the possible probabilities of the various probabilities of possible outcomes. So the idea of observer is inherent, it's inevitable for the quantum mechanics to include that there must be some observer. To any system there should be some observer. Otherwise, there is no sense of separate of I'm sorry. Okay. I think I lost internet. Without an observer, all these concepts of quantum mechanics will have no value. The Schrodinger value itself will not Schrodinger equation and state vector. These concepts will be as themselves, they will have no value. Always to produce some physical effects leading us to the events which we see in the outside phenomenal world, it requires. So this is the feature of this theory, that it of course requires the presence of an observer. This is just my understanding. I hope that I described it, but maybe I will be glad if you or other honored present will.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, it's sort of like with the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, right? That you need an observer to kind of collapse.
You need observer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Okay. Thank you.
You need observer. You can, but otherwise we will just have the set of probabilities.
Right.
To put it bluntly.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good question.
But of course, the many worlds interpretation would push it back against that. And they clearly argue that, although we would disagree with this, they would say that, we went through billions of years of no conscious observers, but nature was still ticking along. We need conscious entities to observe it. So quantum mechanics can still do its thing without humans interacting with it.
In many words, interpretation.
Yeah.
No need for observer. Yes, as I understand, it's ticking its way without observer.
It's the only deterministic quantum interpretation. So in that way, it can exist without external observers.
Okay, then what I said pertains only to traditional quantum mechanics, let's say it, not many worlds interpretation. Yes, yes, thank you very much, Doug. This accomplishes the answer to the question of Christina, that in many worlds interpretation, really, there is no need to observer at all. Thank you.
Okay, we have one. Thank you very much. That was an interesting point. That there's a question here by Ashish. Ashish, is there insight into specific senses, not the subtle body, that Jivatma possesses that enable it to communicate with other Jivatmas and Paramatma?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you very much for this question. So the Buddha Prabhu doesn't discuss it, as far as I understand in this book. Srila Prabhupada, yes, Brahmacharya Prabhu, thank you so much for leading us. So the Srila Prabhupada said that there are, yes, that there are spiritual senses, spiritual sense of smell, spiritual sense of seeing, hearing, spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, yes, but and these senses also, as we know, on the absolute platform are interchangeable with one another. But to be more, I do not possess more specific quotes about it. Maybe someone of you will help to unfold this mystery. But so the Buddha Prabhu said that there is much to be said about it, and there is information in Vedic literature, but he doesn't give any specific quotes on this subject.
Okay, yeah, there was a part in the book that mentioned that if we did give this non-mechanistic perspective, then we can always just continue to examine the effects, what we're observing. As if we just gave it a mechanistic perspective and then just figured out what it was, then all scientists would kind of be out of business. I think Prishni has a question.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. One is that the analogy Sadhguru gives later, I'm not exactly sure where, but it's a familiar one, the little man in the brain. I think really is a simple way to look at this whole infinite regress. So, we have a mechanistic system in the brain, but there's somebody that's watching. So we can call that observer the little man in the brain. But then, okay, so now he's our observer, right? But how about the brain of the little man in the brain? So we include him in the system, but then we have his mind, so he's an observer. So I think there's a picture somewhere with this infinite regress of little men in the brain of the little men that are in the brain. You get this infinite thing. And so that's why it doesn't explain anything, because it does create this infinite regress. You can keep getting smaller and smaller. Like Hemroff is looking now for that mechanism for consciousness to be in the microtubules. But if you go back 500 years before now, they were looking in the pituitary gland, because scientists look for consciousness in the smallest thing that they're able to perceive. So, everyone laughs now, oh, we thought consciousness in the pituitary gland, but that was the smallest thing they knew, in 1500s. Now they know these microtubules, so they're looking there, but at some point there'll be something smaller. They won't find it there. So they'll look smaller. Oh, but it's not here in the microtubules, it's here, and they found something smaller. And then you can just keep pushing that back. Right. The other thing I wanted to mention about this multi-world theory is a conversation I had with my sister. She has a PhD in biology, very long career in pharmaceuticals, and is a devout atheist. And so when we talk, it's pretty interesting. So we were talking about, the eternality of the soul, and she was not able on any level to understand. I could not explain to her what the soul was. It didn't compute, because she's so mechanistic in her thinking. And then I finally had the realization. I said, then she does, in one sense. If you think you're your body, then in that sense, you do die when the body dies, because your sense of self is destroyed. It really is if you're, so I was thinking of that in terms of this it's a, you know, so you have this multi-world theory, but it does the same thing. It's not that you ever reach the self with it. You're just saying, well, there's things I'm doing something somewhere else. I'm doing something somewhere else. I'm doing something somewhere else. So it's like that infinite birth, rebirth, birth, you know, birth, death, rebirth. Yeah. And so you keep on going in the multi-world system. In the same way, my sister, you know, just everything ends when my universe ends, but then you just start another universe, but it doesn't get you anywhere. So my whole understanding was that this is what Sadhguru said, you brought out so nicely, that you really need a different process, that this kind of mechanistic process can just jettison you into another material world or another body. So just like you go body, 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 you could go universe, 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 but it's the same thing. So anyway, there's a lot, as Brahmatirtha said, there's a lot to do to develop this other approach, and that's what we're doing here. So we're working on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Krishna. Okay, is there anyone else? Any
Yeah.
other comments?
Can I ask you a question? I don't know how to raise a hand.
That's okay. Go ahead, Stita D.
So this is kind of a dopey question because I'm not a physicist, but I'm aware of the discussion about the need for an observer, you know, within a context of quantum mechanics. A little bit aware of that. The shorter, the cat analogy or metaphor. And Doug raised the discussion of, but you know, what about quantum physics before, you know, the acknowledgement, you know, human beings, a presence of human beings as an observer. All right, so that raised the question in my mind is, what's the relationship between the observer and the reality of quantum physics, and why would the observer have to be a human being if there is some dependence on an observer and some kind of function in quantum physics? Does that make sense as a question?
It's very difficult. Yeah, I think I got the point. Does the observer necessary to be a human being? Yes.
I mean, amongst discussions of physicists, I mean, yeah. Why would the observer need to be a human being?
No, as far as I know, that sometimes it is said that this can mechanistic observing device, some cameras or something like this. But finally, there is contradiction because the results of the measurements made by such cameras, etc., they again has to be analyzed by some conscious personalities, for example, human beings.
All right, I might be missing a whole lot, but it seems to. I'm not talking about mechanistic consciousness. Why are they assuming sentient consciousness is restricted to human life as they are experiencing it at present? I mean, you know, it's from a science. I mean, I don't want to get into aliens and stuff, but it's a huge universe out there, getting bigger all the time. How, you know, is it for there to be a conscious observer restricted to human life of one tiny little planet? Seems limiting.
Oh,
Yes, I didn't think about it. Yes, Dr. Wu, please.
I didn't mean just human observers. What I meant to say was, again, this is what we do in cosmology. You extend the evolution here to the physical laws of the whole universe. And the idea being that you undergo billions of years of evolution without any type of conscious observer, let alone human.
Well, how do they know that?
I don't. That's the posture.
No, I mean, I'm not saying it's true or not, but to make that statement as it's a proposal at this stage. They don't know if, you know. Okay, the universe went on quite nicely according to current appreciation of physics. How do they know there wasn't an observer there? You know, how, you know, even within the evolution, a concept of biological evolution, that consciousness wasn't available in other aspects of this grand, whatever the heck it is, it's outside there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in another sense, tying in Christina and Prishni's point is that You can argue that the universe is conscious, so there's always an observer, internal or external. And either way, if this does lead us into an infinite regression, well, that's even better. That allows us another point of insertion philosophically, because even if you have a deterministic many worlds theory, you're still not telling us anything about how that came into being at all. You're just telling us how it's operating mechanically. But how did those laws arise? Why does it work that way? That's a question that can't be explained mechanistically. So that's
Yeah,
another area where we could really insert some nice influence.
yeah, at a certain point, from a empirical standpoint, experience only goes so far from a human perspective. And hopefully from a scientific perspective, those boundaries will increase over time. But, how can you say where the boundary, if there are even boundaries? But I guess, again, I think you've already touched upon it, but for a mechanistic philosopher to make the argument, because human consciousness is required to have an observer, and yet the laws went on, even without getting into metaphysical ideas of a conscious universe or whatever, how do they know that? How would they, maybe in Alpha Centauria, there's a pinhead there studying the cosmos. It's a pretty blank statement to say that there's no consciousness in the universe on any level of possibility outside of what they experience presently on Earth. So I'm really limiting to that. How do mechanistic physicists make an argument there's no possibility of consciousness anywhere in the universe except on Earth?
Oh, yeah. Should I speak on behalf of
Yes, please, Dr. Mo, please say the
Yeah,
situation.
on behalf of scientists who may make that argument, how would they
Yeah.
respond?
I think you're totally right. If you take the whole sort of concordance model of cosmology, there's been an evolution that's been sort of primordial with nothing conscious going on for quite a while. That's the assumption. You can't test that, but that's the assumption. So that's a huge asterisk in the theory, is that life had not been able to evolve given the circumstances of the universe for a certain amount of time, whether it's humans or not. Certain life could not have evolved within, just say, the first million years, if you want.
But they can't test that either.
No,
I
of course
guess what I'm saying is, what they can say is life as they understand it manifest on Earth does not appear likely to have evolved at some earlier point of the universe as far as they understand the unfolding of the material cosmos.
correct. If we extend the local laws of physics to the universe, then biology extends that way. So that's the extrapolation.
Okay, so they're making an absolute statement that's the only thing that would be possible,
Yes.
which is a religious statement. Ooh. No.
Raise your hand.
I think, Nartaka, go ahead.
Yeah, well, according to the Vedas, Sarvagata,
Yeah.
living entities are everywhere. And that means all over the cosmic manifestation. And the Vedas are the instruction manual that came with the universe. So that's the Vedic version.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We're not challenging that. We're just sort of trying to translate that into, discourse. I mean, from our perspective, broadly speaking, consciousness isn't dependent on the material energy at all. It's just that due to the jivas having conditional desires, the material energy facilitates form to explore conditional desire, on and on and on. But we bring all kinds of tools, concerns to this discussion.
Yeah, but that's a really important point. I think that's what's given rise to the popularity of panpsychism and other
Yeah.
philosophies, because there's an acknowledgement that there could be consciousness throughout and across time.
And I wouldn't think Sadhguru would be that surprised about any of this, because panpsychism was getting popular in the 70s for sure. I mean, these things come and go. He wasn't here to see maybe a current trend toward it being a more dominant argument or discussion, but these things are always around. And I think, you know, because he's making an argument, it's not like he's limited by that argument or any mature scholar. But, you know, there's an audience, there's a debate, and it's like a lesson to an audience. You're picking, you know, because you're, you know, discussing a certain topic with fifth graders or college students, it doesn't mean the teacher's limited by the perimeters of that teaching example. So, you know, I mean, panpsychism was big in the 70s, and these things have been around forever. They're not new. What's a little bit new is how it's trending towards more dominant discussion within the a respectable scientific discourse. All right, I either just freaked everybody out or I made a good point. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, thank you. No, it was a good point. I don't think anyone's freaked out. So I just want to
Well, let me
read.
try again. No, I'm sorry.
There's a comment here because someone asked about the senses. Ashish asked about the senses. And Langa Ganesha said the Bhagavad Gita reveals that Krishna stated that, quote, all the senses, I am the mind, end quote. It is also stated that thinking, feeling, and wishing are the only functions of the mind. Further, the only thing that the individual jiva can do is to accept or reject these observations of the mind. It is from an understanding of a conclusion that the experiment can be conducted, and the results determine one's realization of the previously unproven idea. Thank you so much for that comment. Okay, is there anyone else? Just one last comment or question, otherwise we'll close. We'll close this call. Yes. Okay, so just from a layperson's perspective, there was one of the quotes by Yantri in the book saying that the problem of consciousness has been discussed at great length by many philosophers. So for thousands of years, they've kind of had both of them together. And yet he was just really happy to throw it away and say, I think it, what did he say? He said, I don't think it has any bearing on our theories. However, everyone just went to our philosophy. So it seems like the work is in reuniting the philosophy and the science. So, and then we get the philosophy of science, and that's probably where the work is. Okay, so our next meeting is Saturday, April 1st. That will be a presentation on chapter 4, Karl Popper on the mind-body problem. A review by Prishni. Our dear Prishni is going to give this next talk. Prishni has a BA in mathematics and currently serves as the secretary and treasurer for both the BIHS and the Richard L. Thompson Archives. And a very, very warm thank you to Dvija Govinda for presenting and for answering questions. Thank you very, very much. And for everyone who participated. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Same channel. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Hey.